Let me ask you something. Have you ever seen a Toyota with 300,000 miles on it still running like it just rolled off the lot? Or a Honda Civic from the early 2000s that somehow outlasted 3 newer cars owned by the same family? Most people chalk it up to Japanese engineering, and sure, that plays a role, but here's the thing, and this is what most car content will never tell you. The engineering is only half the story, maybe less than half, because I've seen plenty of Japanese engines that died young, blown up, seized, neglected into the scrapyard before they hit 150,000 miles. And I've seen American and European engines push past 250,000 with no drama at all. So if it's not just about where the car was made or who designed the engine, what is the real secret? That's exactly what we're going to get into today. And by the end of this, you're going to look at your own car differently. I promise you that. I want to start with a story. There's a mechanic named Hiroshi. Not someone I'm making up, but a composite of several real conversations I've had and research I've done into Japanese automotive culture. And Hiroshi has been working on cars in Osaka for over 30 years. He says something that stuck with me. He says the engine doesn't wear out. The owner does. What he means is that the engine, if it's properly designed, can theoretically run for an enormous number of miles. What kills it is neglect. What kills it is the accumulation of 1,000 small decisions that the driver never thought mattered. A skipped oil change here, an ignored warning light there, a cold engine revved too hard on a January morning. None of those things feel catastrophic in the moment, but they compound. They layer on top of each other like sediment, and eventually you've got an engine that's 10 years old but feels like it's 25. Now, Japanese car culture, particularly the culture around how people in Japan actually maintain their vehicles, is genuinely different from what most Western drivers experience, and this is important because the same Toyota Corolla engine that's been celebrated for its reliability can and does fail when it's not maintained the Japanese way. There's a system called Shaken in Japan, which is a mandatory vehicle inspection that happens every 2 years for cars older than 3 years. It's rigorous, it's not a quick emissions check. It's a full technical inspection that covers brakes, lights, suspension, emissions, and yes, engine health. The cost of failing Shaken, or the cost of getting your car ready for it, motivates owners to stay on top of maintenance proactively rather than reactively. They fix the small rattle before it becomes a broken mount. They replace the worn belt before it snaps and takes out the whole top end of the engine. The culture of waiting until something breaks simply doesn't exist in the same way, because the system doesn't allow it. Think about that for a second. In a lot of places, people only take their car to a mechanic when something goes wrong. The check engine light comes on, and they ignore it for 3 weeks because nothing feels different. The brakes start squealing, but they still stop fine, so why rush? That mindset, the if it ain't broke mindset, is one of the most expensive things you can apply to a car engine. Because inside that engine, things are always happening. Oil is degrading. Small amounts of moisture are mixing with combustion byproducts and turning acidic. Tiny metal particles are circulating through your oil passages. None of that is visible from the driver's seat. None of that triggers a warning light. But all of it is slowly increasing the rate at which your engine wears itself down. And the only thing standing between a healthy engine and an accelerating wear cycle is fresh, clean oil changed on a consistent schedule. Let's talk about oil, because this is where I see the most confusion. People get very caught up in which oil to use. Synthetic versus conventional. This brand versus that brand. 5W30 versus 0W20. And look, those things matter to a degree. But I've watched mechanics with decades of experience say over and over again that a cheap oil changed on time will always beat an expensive oil changed late, always. The chemistry of engine oil is simple at its core. It lubricates, it cools, it cleans, and it protects. But as it does those jobs, it degrades. The additives break down, the oil oxidizes, the viscosity changes, and once that happens, it stops doing its job as effectively. So when you push past your oil change interval, whether that's 3,000 miles, 5,000 miles, or 7,500 miles depending on your car and oil type, you're running an engine on compromised protection. You're asking a worn-out bodyguard to protect a very expensive piece of machinery. And the engine doesn't care that you used premium synthetic. It only knows whether the oil inside it is doing its job right now. Fleet operators understand this better than almost anyone. Companies that run large fleets of vehicles, delivery trucks, taxis, rental cars, track their maintenance costs obsessively because engine failures are expensive and downtime costs money. And what they've found consistently is that the vehicles with the lowest long-term repair costs are not necessarily the ones with the fanciest parts or the most expensive fluids. They're the ones with the most consistent service records. The ones that get their oil changed every single time, on schedule, no exceptions. The ones where the filters get replaced, the coolant gets flushed, the belts get inspected. Consistency beats quality every single time in the real world. A fleet manager once told me that he'd rather have a driver who changes the oil on time every time using decent conventional oil than a driver who uses top-shelf full synthetic but stretches every interval by 2,000 or 3,000 miles, because the math just doesn't work in the second driver's favor, not over time. Now let's get into something that almost nobody talks about, and that's the way you actually drive your car on a daily basis, because your driving habits are doing as much damage or as much good as your maintenance schedule. Here's a classic example. It's a cold morning. You jump in the car, you start it up, and within 30 seconds you're backing out of the driveway and heading down the road at normal speed. Feels fine, right? The car moves, the heater works, everything seems normal, but inside that engine, the oil is thick and cold. It hasn't fully circulated through all the passages yet. Key metal components haven't expanded to their proper operating tolerances, and you're already putting load on the engine. You're already asking it to perform. This is one of the single most damaging habits a driver can have, and it's also one of the most common. In Japan, particularly among older drivers and professional drivers, there's a habit of letting the car idle for 30 seconds to a full minute after a cold start before driving. Not 5 minutes like people used to do with carbureted engines. Modern fuel-injected engines don't need that. But 30 to 60 seconds of gentle idling, followed by at least the first mile or two of driving at low RPMs and low load, makes a meaningful difference in how much wear your engine experiences over its lifetime. The oil gets a chance to circulate. The metal gets a chance to warm up. The clearances settle into their operating range, and then you can drive normally. This one habit alone, practiced consistently over the life of a car, can add tens of thousands of miles to engine life. It costs nothing. It takes less than a minute, and almost nobody does it. The same philosophy applies to how you accelerate. Hard acceleration from a stop, stomping on the gas, spinning the tires, that kind of thing, puts enormous stress on every rotating component in the drivetrain. But even short of that, aggressive acceleration during the first few minutes of driving on a cold engine is hard on cylinder walls, piston rings, and valve train components. Smooth, gradual acceleration lets the engine build load progressively. It keeps oil pressure stable. It keeps combustion temperatures in a range that the cooling system can manage. And over time, smooth driving habits are one of the most powerful tools you have for extending engine life. Not because any single acceleration event damages the engine, it's the cumulative effect. It's what happens when you drive aggressively every single day for 10 years versus what happens when you drive smoothly. The engines tell the story. Mechanics can often tell within the first few minutes of working on an engine whether it was driven hard or driven gently. The carbon deposits, the wear patterns on the cylinder walls, the condition of the pistons, it all leaves evidence. Let me bring up something that I think deserves its own moment here, and that's the early warning sign problem. Your car communicates with you constantly. It communicates through sounds, through vibrations, through smells, through how it feels under your hands on the wheel, and most drivers have trained themselves to ignore all of it. The new noise that appeared 3 weeks ago and then seemed to go away, your engine remembers that. The slight vibration at highway speed that you just sort of got used to, something caused that. The small oil spot under the car that's been there for a month, that oil is coming from somewhere. Every one of those signals is your car giving you an opportunity to fix something small and cheap before it becomes something large and expensive. I'll give you a concrete example. A valve cover gasket leak. This is one of the most common leaks on higher mileage engines, and it's also one of the least expensive things to fix when caught early. A new gasket and a couple hours of labor, but if you ignore it, the oil that's leaking can drip onto hot exhaust components and create a fire risk. It can contaminate the serpentine belt and cause it to slip or fail, and as the leak slowly gets worse, your oil level drops. Not dramatically, slowly. So slowly that you might not notice until you're a quart low. And running an engine a quart low on oil raises operating temperature, reduces lubrication, and accelerates wear in ways that don't show up immediately but absolutely show up eventually. A simple weekly habit of walking around the car, glancing under it, checking the oil level, listening for anything new. This habit catches those gasket leaks and fluid drops before they become crises. It's the mechanic's equivalent of washing your hands before surgery. Simple, unglamorous, absolutely critical. There's also something worth understanding about coolant, because I think coolant is the most underrated fluid in your car. People think about oil constantly and forget that coolant exists until their temperature gauge goes into the red. But coolant does 3 things. It carries heat away from the engine. It prevents corrosion inside the cooling system. And it prevents freezing and boiling at temperature extremes. Over time, coolant degrades. The corrosion inhibitors break down. The pH of the fluid changes. And when that happens, the coolant starts attacking the metal components of your cooling system from the inside. It corrodes the water pump impeller. It eats away at the aluminum surfaces inside the engine block. It can cause pinhole leaks in the radiator. And all of this leads to cooling inefficiency, which leads to the engine running hotter than it should, which accelerates wear on everything. Most manufacturers recommend a coolant flush somewhere between 30,000 and 100,000 miles, depending on the type of coolant. A lot of drivers have never done it. Their car might have the original coolant from the factory, and their engine is slowly paying the price. Here's one that's going to feel counterintuitive. A lot of people think that modern cars require less maintenance because they're more sophisticated. And in some ways, that's true. The engine management systems are better, the tolerances are tighter, the materials are more advanced. But in another very real sense, modern engines are less forgiving of neglect, not more. The tighter tolerances that make modern engines more efficient also make them more sensitive to oil quality and oil change intervals. The variable valve timing systems, the turbochargers, the direct injection systems, all of these add complexity, and all of them require clean, properly lubricated operation to function correctly. A turbocharged engine, for example, runs the turbo bearing on engine oil. That bearing spins at tens of thousands of RPM and gets extremely hot. If your oil is degraded, dirty, or low, that turbo bearing is the first thing to suffer. And a replacement turbocharger is not a cheap repair. Yet the entire thing is preventable with timely oil changes and a 30-second check of your oil level every couple of weeks. Let's talk about what long-term car owners, the people who actually push vehicles past 200,000 or 300,000 miles, consistently say about how they got there. Because these people exist everywhere, not just in Japan. And when you listen to them, certain patterns emerge with remarkable consistency. They change their oil on time, every time, no excuses. They address noises and leaks quickly rather than waiting. They warm up the engine gently before loading it. They don't rev the engine hard until it's fully up to operating temperature. They check their fluids regularly. They follow the manufacturer's maintenance schedule, not some optimistic extended version of it. They use the correct grade of oil for their engine. And they pay attention. They know what their car sounds like, what it feels like, what it smells like when everything is right. So when something changes, they notice it immediately. That last part, paying attention, is maybe the most underrated of all. There's a term used in Japanese manufacturing philosophy called kaizen, which roughly translates to continuous improvement. Applied to car ownership, it means consistently looking for small things to improve, small issues to address, small habits to refine. It means never accepting good enough as a reason to stop paying attention. The drivers who reached 300,000 miles with a reliable engine didn't get there by accident. They got there by being consistently engaged with how their vehicle was doing. They were their car's first line of defense. And because they were, the car rewarded them with longevity that seemed miraculous to everyone else. One more thing I want to address, because I see this mistake constantly, is the idea that you can make up for skipped maintenance with better products later. People skip 3 oil changes, then decide to do a high-mileage oil flush and a premium synthetic change, and somehow reset the clock. It doesn't work like that. The damage from those skipped changes, the increased wear on cylinder walls, the carbon deposits on piston rings, the sludge that might have started forming, that damage is done. A good oil change absolutely helps, and high-mileage treatments have their place. But they can slow further degradation. They can't undo what already happened. This is why timing matters more than product quality. A mediocre product used consistently at the right intervals will always produce better long-term results than a premium product used too late and too irregularly. So here's where we land. The secret to a Japanese engine, or any engine, that seems to never quit is not some exotic metallurgy that only certain factories have access to. It's not a special oil or a magic additive. It's not even entirely about the engineering, as impressive as Japanese automotive engineering genuinely is. It's about what happens after the car leaves the factory. It's about the habits of the person sitting in the driver's seat. The consistent oil changes, the gentle cold starts, the smooth acceleration, the coolant flushes, the quick response to that new noise or that small leak, the attention, the discipline, the understanding that a car engine is a long-term relationship, not a product you use until it stops working. Engine longevity is earned. It is the result of accumulated good decisions made over months and years. Every time you change your oil on schedule, you're adding life to your engine. Every time you let it warm up gently, you're reducing wear. Every time you catch a small problem early, you're preventing a large one later. And every time you ignore a warning sign or push past a service interval, you're making a withdrawal from an account that has a limited balance. The engines that never quit are the ones mechanics shake their heads at in disbelief and admiration. Those engines had owners who understood this, who treated maintenance not as an inconvenience, but as an investment, who respected what it took to keep a mechanical system running at its best, year after year, mile after mile. Your car can be that engine. It doesn't matter if it's Japanese or not. What matters is what you do with it, starting right now. Take care of it consistently, pay attention to what it tells you, and don't wait for something to break before you act. Because the secret was never about the car. It was always about the driver.